we're shooing for prom queen? That is so not funny.
Jawbreaker is a 1999 American black comedy film written and directed by Darren Stein, starring Rose McGowan, Rebecca Gayheart, Julie Benz, Judy Greer, Carol Kane, and Pam Grier. Let's take a quick look.
You should have seen the four of them. People worshipped them and cursed them, but everybody wanted to be them. Courtney was the leader.
All right, girls, out.
She was like Satan in heels, and Marcy was her henchman.
I don't think we've met what with the cruel politics of high school and all.
At a school like Reagan High, being the teen dream can be a little hard to swallow.
It is with deep dismay that I inform you that Elizabeth Purr...
I heard she choked on a jawbreaker.
That is so cool.
Are you Courtney Shane?
Maybe.
Now,
I'm Detective Vera Cruz.
one detective will try to find the face that fits the facts.
You ever seen one of these before?
No. No?
Take a lot of licks to get one of these things down. It's hard. You frighten me.
Learn it. Live it. Love it.
From TriStar Pictures,
You like it?
It's okay.
There's nothing kinky about okay, now is there?
Can you say freak?
comes the battle between the babes.
She's so evil. And she's only in high school.
It's over, Courtney.
I am petrified.
Jawbreaker.
Welcome back to the Cult of Films. I'm your host, John, and you know that by now, but what you don't know is I have a very special guest, a returning guest, one of my great friends in the movie reviewing ethos, whatever it's called, and that is Mrs. Lindsay Washburn. Thank you for joining us again.
Well, thank you so much for having me again. It's always fun to guest on your channel.
Just too kind. So before we jump into what we're talking about tonight, Lindsay, let's talk about our special guest, and that is I have a BSB in honor of this movie. I have something very sweet, and this is the brown sugar bourbon from the Washington State area. This thing it scares me because it's like instant hangover in a bottle. I have to wake up super early tomorrow, but I needed something sweet and gross to talk about Jawbreaker.
I've got my usual concoction of cherry McGillicuddies and Red Bull. Yeah.
It just never, like, the turn in the stomach every time you announce it never gets old.
It's super sweet.
Okay. We are gathered here today to talk about 1999's Jawbreaker. That is directed by Darren Stein. Who is Darren Stein? Not a lot of people know. He didn't do much aside from this film, and that seems to be a theme with the whole crew, but more on that later. Just focusing in on Darren Stein, this seems to be quite a passion project for him, and he's, done like documentaries about this. It's just his thing, right? Like, this is Darren Stein's thing.
I read I think it was on IMDb, I'm not sure exactly where I saw it, where he was first going to write a horror film, but during the process of writing it, he was like, this is more dark comedy, because he evidently, some girls he went to high school with would do this to their girlfriends, where they would kidnap them on their birthdays and play pranks on them like that. And so that was the seed that germinated into this story, and here we are talking about Jawbreaker.
And here we are. This is a very dark comedy, but even though everything is super pastel, the aesthetics of this look like candy, which is a great aesthetic choice. I invited you on. Why did you decide you want to talk about Jawbreaker?
Well, it came out around the time that I was in high school, and I really love those late 90s R-rated teen films like this, Cruel Intentions, Scream. There was a ton of horror movies that came out at this time, Varsity Blues, things like that. Yeah.
You're naming all the future Cult of Films episodes. Yeah.
And this one always stuck out to me just because, like with so many of those films that I just mentioned and others, the fashion and the music really come to the forefront to define them.
And I feel like every 10 years we get a movie like this. In the 80s, it was Heathers. In the 2000s, you had Mean Girls. And then smack in the middle, you have a big old Jawbreaker. All three, I feel, are iconic, but I feel like this is kind of the black sheep of the trio, where the fans, like, Heathers is super sacrosanct. Mean Girls just, like, completely changed the game as far as comedy goes, I think, in the 2000s. And then there's Jawbreaker, which is definitely a cult film, has a cult following, especially for people that grew up in that era, like you and I did.
No, I don't think so either. And this film has, if you watch it, you see how heavily it's influenced by Heathers. But if you watch Mean Girls, you see how heavily that film is influenced by Jawbreaker. It's like, sure. Jawbreaker walked so Mean Girls could run.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the character of Courtney Shane, I think, is a perfect amalgamation of Regina George and JD from Heathers, where, she has that kind of plastic exterior, and deep down you have that ruthlessness of JD, where she'll just kill a bitch.
Oh, yeah, Satan in heels. But she plays it so well because she's got that look, that mischievous brattiness to her, and she hits it so well in this film.
Looping Marilyn Manson into this role, that like the two of them were dating, and I think that the initial cut was like NC-17 because their scene together was so graphic, and I'm almost glad that we got to cut that a little bit.
Yeah, that's something that I did not need to see any more of.
He's just like, I don't want a word of dialogue, and I want to, have sex with my girlfriend on screen. And it's like, oh, right. He was Marilyn Manson in the 90s. Who was going to say no?
Right? Even just the rest of the cast, I think, did a really, really good job. And they were cast very well for the roles that they played.
Yeah, I mean, Rebecca Gayheart did a good job, as did her eyeballs. I don't know. I was never a huge fan of her in the 90s. Julie Benz, I don't really remember too much she was in, but she puts in a pretty underrated performance. She's pretty hilarious.
She was very good. She was really, really good. And Judy Greer's good in everything that she does.
But again, yeah, Judy Greer is great. Pam Greer's doing her thing. The two Greers, strange, spelled different. They put in great performances, but then there was, and even Carol Kane, but this was Rose McGowan's film. This was her putting on a goddamn clinic.
Oh, yes. No, she was perfect for this film. And even, part of her performance was, competitive with the other actresses, because I saw another behind the scenes thing where she has that outlandish hairstyle at the end with all the ropes in it, the silvery ropes. Well, she saw Rebecca Gayheart come out of the trailer with flowers in her hair, and she went back in and demanded to have a more outlandish hairstyle so that she stood out better. I'm like, that's typecasting right there.
Oh, it's so good. Yeah, she just committed to this role so well. The cinematographer was Amy Vincent. She doesn't have another DP credit to her name. This was it was made for $3.5 million. It made $3.1 million. So this thing, for all intents and purposes, was a complete bomb. It got 11%, critic ratings when it came out. No one fucking liked this film.
No. It did not do well at all. Roger Ebert review of this, they said it was one of their worst of the year for 1999. And their big criticism was that it was very cynical.
Oh, God.
I'm like, I think that was the point.
What is Jawbreaker about, Lindsay?
This clique in a high school, the super popular girls. And they like to play this prank where they kidnap each other on their birthdays and take them out to a really fatty breakfast or take them to some unknown location just to scare them and to just pull a prank. And they do it to one of their friends named Liz Purr. I love that name. And they stick a Jawbreaker in her mouth to gag her with. And after they get to the diner where they're gonna stuff her face full of pancakes, they open the trunk and see that she's choked on this giant Jawbreaker and she's dead. And the rest of the film is them trying to figure out what to do and cover up what they did, and various things happen.
How ambiguous the rest of the film kind of plays out. Liz, during the opening exposition by Fern Mayo, Liz is the number one because she's also like a super nice person and she's super likable, juxtaposed with Courtney Shane, who is just a mean girl. So it doesn't beat you over the head. It leaves some things open to interpretation, and maybe, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seemed like you don't know if she intended to murder Liz.
Yeah, because while they're trying to figure out what happened, the other girls are like, you put a jawbreaker in her mouth. They didn't know that that's what she did. Right. So it was a surprise to them. They're like, what's in her throat? Oh my God.
She already had the plan kind of cooked up. So, you could put it together that that's probably what the intention was. Never took itself too serious, and it was always so self-aware that it was like, yeah, this happened, and now they just kind of like go pick up her homework from school and just kind of go about their days. And like the first thing that Foxy says,
"You're a shoo-in for prom queen?"
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite lines.
Oh, it's so good. It gives you a little bit of the other characters' backstory. Like Foxy's like her dad's just like berating her at the dinner table, just like, you're a fucking follower, and but she's never likable. She's not like that Gretchen Wieners where it's like sympathetic. Like, no, she's just a piece of shit too.
Right. When they're trying to stage the crime scene back at Liz's house, and Fern Mayo, played by Judy Greer, her last name is very telling. Her last name is Mayo, and she's super Mayo, very vanilla. She's like the social pariah at the high school, wears really drab clothes, no makeup, just long brown hair, a Carrie type of character.
Sure, yeah.
It's kind of that social outcast. And she witnesses what they're doing, and their way of fixing it is to promise her popularity and to be someone and not be ignored. And that's one of the things I like most about this film, because when she comes to the door and they see that she's there, Rose McGowan's character says, "I don't think we've met, what with the cruel politics of high school."
Yeah. So says, the Donald Trump of the school. Yeah.
Right. And so they offer her to be one of them, and she jumps at that chance.
Yeah.
Because who would want to be popular? In this universe,
the transformation to Violet, and Judy Greer, she has to play two characters in this because she has to play that completely bland Fern Mayo, and then she gets to be this kind of grandiose, and then she gets a little bit too big for her bridges, and
right.
It's just such a I guess one of the things that I would criticize this movie for is just how fast it is. It's just such a quick 90 minutes and it's done. I wish it was a little bit longer to kind of flesh out some of the backstory a little bit more.
Yeah, there's not a lot of character development in this film, that's for sure. We get that exposition dump at the beginning saying who everyone is and what their place is within this high school society. But yeah, it's like your fingers snap and she's the new it girl. And we don't get to see a lot of how she's interacting with these people for them to revere her so quickly. Some of that is just kind of left up to us to fill in the blanks, which sometimes is a little annoying because it'd be nice to see some of that stuff of why they're like, oh, she's the coolest now.
Right.
But it's not the main point of the story, so I can see why they skipped over some of that stuff, but it would have been nice to see more of that development happen.
Sure, like why Julie was so quick to kind of, shed all that and just kind of, have a conscience suddenly. You could be, it could be said that it was because she was kind of the closest to Liz, and maybe that was her connection to that anyways, but she's kind of a shitty person at the beginning too.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, because her and Fern used to be friends, and there's that phone call where they do the split screen and stuff. It reminded me of the three-way call thing in Mean Girls.
Yeah.
And she's reminiscing like, hey, remember we used to be friends? Time is so crazy. And it's funny how things erase time, and Fern's like, no, people erase it. Rebecca Gayhart's character is like, oh yeah, I guess I was a piece of shit. And I dumped you for the cool kids.
Right, yeah. You have the introduction, because there is a murder, or whatever they make it seem like it is also. So we get Pam Grier is Detective Vera Cruz, and she just straight up plays a Pam Grier character. I mean, they literally just like Pam Grier show up and act like a detective, and she nails it because it's just her, right? It's like Samuel L. Jackson coming on anything. He's just gonna be Samuel L. Jackson, which is great. It takes a little bit out of it with how this movie unfolds at the end, because it's almost like, there was no stakes and there was no real reason for her to be in it anyways.
Because they end up arresting Marilyn Manson's character, and it's like they have this huge setup at the prom to expose her, using the little card that recorded her saying, "I killed Liz, I killed the teenage dream,"
Deal with
which is another iconic line. But okay, so she's humiliated in front of the school, and then that's it.
That's it. And then it's the movie.
But I mean, that's what she cared about the most, was that these people loved her and feared her, and now they think she's a horrible, horrible person. So that's kind of the ultimate punishment for that character, I guess.
Sure. One of my favorite 5 minutes of cinema too. Right? Like, it's so batshit, and it's just so crazy. Another great line, the boyfriend's playing that card over the loudspeakers, and then just everyone gets real quiet, and then you see her friends, and it goes like slow-mo, and you hear, "That bitch!" And everyone just starts throwing their corsages at her, and then she's just like rubbing her, like all the tearing the makeup off her face and like ripping at her own hair. Julie's at the end of that whole line, and she's just like, "Julie," and then she's just like, smile or whatever, and then she's like, It's just so bizarre.
It's super bizarre. I mean, it's very reminiscent of the end of Carrie.
Right.
Because, she's up there, she's getting crowned prom queen, and then we have this slow-mo just destruction of her. You could see that the director kind of wanted us to draw those conclusions from those films, because William Katt and PJ Soles play Liz Purr's parents, and they were both in Carrie. And then also Jeff Conaway from Grease plays Fox's character, Marcy Fox's dad.
Oh, yeah.
So he's got these other teenage films, characters from them kind of populating this one.
That's awesome. I didn't even put that together. But yeah, you're totally right. It's fun to see how it's evolved, where it kind of started as just like a bubblegum blowing, like teenage boppy. I mean, you could even say like The Outsiders were, like kind of more male-centric version of this. And then you have, then it just goes like completely like horseshit crazy with Carrie and Heathers, and then kind of comes back, into just a pure comedy. So I'm ready for just a full-on, horror version of this again.
Right? This would be there's a lot of remakes in Hollywood right now, and for some reason they think they need to remake movies that are already good or already did really well or universally loved. It's like, no, take some of these cult films or films that completely flopped and remake those and try to improve upon them however you can. Because doing a straight up horror version of this film, I think would be pretty interesting. Because
of how ambiguous the ending to this plays out, you don't get exposition in like a type line on the screen like most movies, where it's just like, Julie wound up going to Harvard and she's doing okay. Heather's obviously, dude goes boom, kind of does that time lapse with Mean Girls. Everyone kind of has this like arc. There's like no arc, so you don't know. You could literally do a sequel to this,
right?
With the same characters, like put Judy Greer, put Rose McGowan's crazy ass in there now. Like, it would be great.
That would be nuts. That would be super nuts.
I would love it. I would absolutely love it. Since it's garnered this huge cult following, and then was a huge influence on other more successful films, like you stated. For a first feature, I mean, I think Darren Stein did another feature, but it's like not even a blip or anything really. Yeah. Like, this was his real feature with like kind of name actors and actresses, and it just was like shot so well, and there were so many good decisions throughout the film. Like some of the scenes, the transformation of Fern Mayo.
Yes.
It had this like weird, almost like early Tim Burton-esque, like cutting in, like spinning, and then you had like her transformation happening while you had the dead girl and Liz in the coffin. Just like fucking cool.
Borderline experimental.
Yeah.
Because you had that scene, and then the scene where Rose McGowan's character goes into the bar to pick up the stranger to have sex in the bed, and also little things like the split screens and some of the sound effects they use, cartoonish sound effects in different parts. It was very creatively done.
Yeah, it was. You're right. It was kind of shot like a Looney Tunes episode for some of it. Like, knew when to scale back to. Like, I laugh, and this is kind of fucked up, but when they're announcing Liz's death on the overhead, and it's Carol Kane's voice, so it's like how it always makes me chuckle no matter what she's saying. Especially, I always think of her in Jarmusch's like The Dead Don't Die.
The Dead Don't Die.
And she's like, Chardonnay. But she's like telling the whole school on the overhead, she's like, Liz died of acute asphyxiation. Like, they would be announcing
just
that over the
outlining
school.
Everything.
Yeah. But it's a really cool scene because like every single person is frozen except for Rebecca Gayheart, and then it does this like kind of blur speed up, and like it'll stop halfway through as this weird time lapse. Again, like for a DP that didn't work really before this, and a director, like super mature filmmaking.
Oh yeah, no, that scene is very it sticks out a lot because it tells the whole story right there without having to have showing a bunch of people in the hallways crying or whatever.
Yeah. Right
there, just the girl on her knees, and then someone's comforting someone else. You know exactly what's going on, and you also get how Rebecca Gayheart's character feels walking through that, and that's all coming through just the way that they shot that scene.
Absolutely. Just like so much detail from the scene selections. They wanted to mix 80s with 50s and put an S&M twist on it.
Oh yeah, I can see that. Well, even just looking at the fashion, you've got the heels they wear, you've got the super tight skirts. Some of them are vinyl material, and then the little sweaters and like the little chokers and ties and stuff. And actually the lady that did the costuming for this also worked on Clueless.
Oh yeah.
And also Romy and Michelle's high school reunion.
Oh, so good.
So you can definitely see the style coming together on that.
Yeah, they wanted to accentuate everything looking like having like popping like a Jawbreaker, like those accents on the actual candy, which is just so awesome. Another great line, Carol Kane, put those bosoms away. This isn't a brothel. It's just so good. I absolutely love this movie. Out of the three or even more, that we discovered while doing this, I feel like this is one of the ones that kind of gets pushed under the rug more than the other ones. I mean, if you haven't seen Jawbreaker, it's streaming on Crackle, so take whatever you want away with that. Wasn't the best rewatching this with commercials, but it was still worth it, like 100%.
Oh yeah, I'm surprised how much stuff is on Crackle. They have a ton of shit on there.
Yeah, someone big owns them, right? It's like.
I think it's Sony, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, that makes sense. Before we let everyone go, we cannot not talk about the soundtrack of this.
Oh, yes, definitely. All that bratty pop punk, like Veruca Salt and the Donnas and several other people.
Literally, the Donnas they're playing the high school prom.
Right. Another iconic shot in this film is when the four of them, or the three of them, are strutting down the high school hallway, and you've got that song, I can't remember who sings it, the Yoo-Hoo song, and they spoofed that moment in Not Another Teen Movie.
Yeah,
where they have different characters come down with their own theme music.
Yeah, one of them falls in the trash can or something, right?
Yes.
Oh, it's so good. Yeah, you had like Letters to Cleo, you had Shampoo, like you said, the Donnas were just like on fire. Yeah, it opens up with Volcano Girls.
Right?
Oh, so good. I love everything about this movie, and it still holds up. Like I was a little nervous to watch, now that I've seen Mean Girls, and I'm now jaded mid-30s person, and I'm just like, I loved this in high school. Does this hold up? And I was like, man, I was laughing at things that I probably didn't get when I was younger. Yeah, it was like rediscovering it all over again. It was great.
No, I loved revisiting because, like I said, I hadn't watched it in many, many years, but I remember liking it a lot when it came out, and it just hits that late 90s teen note so well. To describe R-rated teen movies in the late 90s, this would be at the top of the list.
And thank God it was R-rated, because I swear to God, that NC-17 rating, good job, Darren Stein. It was not worth it. We all won. The porn stash was enough. I mean, he looked like, it was cool because like Marilyn Manson looks just like John Waters, almost like a young John Waters in this. And it kind of felt like a John Waters film, right?
It definitely had that camp to it, and some of the more because it's a very sparkly film. It's not as grungy as some of the John Waters stuff looks like, but it definitely had those sensibilities, and the fashion was crazy. But the camp was very much there.
Yeah. Smartly written. John Waters probably didn't get more than $10 for any of his films for budget. So this actually had a couple mil. So do you agree with us? I mean, I don't usually gush as much about films on here, but this one it's hard to pick apart Jawbreaker because, is it a flawless film? No, it's a teen comedy kind of, from the 90s. However, like if you're going to be a dick and pick apart Jawbreaker, then just turn this video off.
And there's really no use in picking it apart because it knows exactly what it is.
Exactly.
It knows exactly what it's doing.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you so much, Mrs. Lindsay Washburn, for joining me once again on the Cult of Films, talking about this incredible film. What are you up to? Where can everyone find you?
You can find me on my YouTube channel, which is just my name, Lindsay Washburn, and that's Lindsay with an A. And you can also find me on Twitter under the Lindsay Washburn.
Excellent stuff. You can find me on this very channel if you found this. I made it easy for you. We now have a Twitter handle for this. It is just simply at the Cult of Films. I am not cool enough nor famous enough like Lindsay to just have my Twitter name be my name. So I still have to kind of jazz it up a little bit. But either way, thank you for watching. Thumbs up or thumbs down the video, whatever you want to do, because, interactions is key. Do that downstairs. Share it around. That is very important. If you want to listen to this in podcast form, it will be up on all the iTunes and Spotify's around the world. Spreaker, if you're into that kind of kink, you could find us there. Leave us apples and oranges. Throw corsages at your speaker device, just like Courtney Shane got. That's do we have a cool sign off for a cool movie like this, Lindsay?
There is one little anecdote about this film that I would love to share.
Oh, please.
And that kind of reflects reflects Rose McGowan's performance. She was nominated for an award for this film, and it was an MTV Movie Award for Best Villain. She did not win, but she did get nominated.
What beat her? I thought just the Oscars were tragic.
Right?
No justice in the MTV Movie Awards.
None at all.
Oh my God. We gotta look up who won, because that is just.
Right, I would love to know who beat her, because she was a pretty good villain.
She needed an Oscar for this. Fuck the movie awards. Perfect. All right, well, you get that little bit of trivia on the outskirts, so we'll see you next time.